Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today is a super interesting session. We're going to be talking all about investment versus development, and we're going to be having a fight. So I've got a very good friend of mine, Bushy Martin, from KnowHow Property. Bushy has been around the traps for a very long period of time, has been on my show multiple times, runs his own podcast, who I'm sure you've actually come across on the Oz Stereo Network. Bushy, Welcome to the arena, my friend.
Great, mate. I've got my boxing gloves on and I'm in the green corner, so I'm ready to come out swinging, Rob.
The green corner. So I think it's red and blue corner, mate. There's no green in boxing.
I'm going to throw green in there just to be different, mate.
That's okay, mate. As long as it's my corporate green, it's all good. Mate, so that we can actually put some context around this conversation, it's going to be investing versus developing. Just give everybody some insights into your, experience, your, investing background. I guess you yourself, financially free, have done this through property. Give us some insights into why we should be listening to your perspective.
Okay, well, I'll keep the Reader's Digest version pretty tight, Rob, because my life's been in two halves. It was pre-divorce and post-divorce. Pre-divorce, I was an architect, project manager, up to the eyeballs in building, thought I knew everything, but knew enough to be dangerous. Dabbled in the development space that we're going to talk a little bit about today, and made all the mistakes that you make under the sun. Post-divorce, had my Kiyosaki moment, and I guess a little bit gun shy of the mistakes I made early. Followed the slower pathway into the investment arena, which we'll elaborate on today, and have really through a combination of property and the learning the process, have I guess put ourselves in a strong position. But then just love educating and helping others to do the same. So probably like you, on a mad mission to wake up and shake up as many hardworking guys as I can to see the benefits in property, to actually fund their lifestyle down the track, and have a lot of fun doing that, mate. So that's probably, I've got a broking license. We owned a property management business. I've got my land agent's license, but never sold property. So I'm one of those that if I'm going to be involved in it, I want to know everything about it, and therefore can add some value to people. So that complement of skills helps us to develop strategy for investors, to finance it and set the strategy and structure around that, because property is a game of finance. And if you get that wrong, that's where you can get yourself into all sorts of trouble. You can limit your capacity, you can increase your risk and increase your cost. And the final piece, we act as an investor's guide dog and watchdog. So it's a bit of a new play in the game, but sadly, there's some pretty average operators out there that are selling great stories and producing average results. We sit on the investor side now and keep an investor's team honest by vetting and validating what they're suggesting and make sure it's actually in concert with what they're trying to achieve.
Very good, mate. So a lot of that first half of your journey is near on identical to mine. Equally, I have successfully divorced. But for me, I've done it twice, mate. Successfully navigated that 2 times. You kind of build it up and then you push all the toys back in the center and you start again. But I did 20 years of buy and hold investing before going down this property development journey. Bought my first house at the age of 18. My first investment property at the age of 21, and actually owned my first house outright at the age of 24. Awesome. So I actually do genuinely believe in the property investing world. I just think I found a better way. So the property development side, and that's what we're going to debate today. But what I like to try and do is take a lot of that investment thinking into the property development world and kind of get a blended approach. And that's hopefully some of the insights that we'll give everybody today. Now, whilst we're going to fight, we're going to respect each other. We shouldn't walk away with any stitches, but there might be a bit of blood and a bit of bruising, mate.
Bring it on, mate. As I mentioned to you off air, I've been playing field hockey for 50 years, and there's not a part of my body that hasn't been broken, stretched, torn, or otherwise. So bring on the bruises.
Well, I'll raise you one first go. So I played semi-professional rugby, my friend. So when we're talking about battered and bruised, I've had 6 knee surgeries, 2 knee reconstructions. I've got a titanium disc in my back. I've got electrodes in my spinal cord. I can take whatever you've got, mate.
You win. there, mate.
Bring it on. I'm the bionic man. So let's start firstly at the very beginning. We've got I guess a mixed audience going to be watching us today. Property investing. Give us some insights into your definition of what property investing is and what it takes to be a property investor.
Yeah, well, awesome. I guess for me, very simply, property investing is just acquiring an existing asset that's income producing, making sure it's a location and a profile that's got the highest growth potential, structuring it well, and then managing your managers so that long term you're collecting rent today, enhancing compounding tomorrow. So there's, if you compare it to developing, it's fewer moving parts, it's bank friendly, it's sort of sleep at night cash flow if you structure it well. And sort of common plays that fall into what I would class as investing are buying established with owner-occupier appeal, make sure it's in tight pockets, that has definite and proven what I call the three eyes of growth, Rob. So new infrastructure, new industry, and strong and growing incomes. Make sure that it has some value add potential, either in buying below market, doing some cosmetics or future development as an exercise, and then just holding and letting the taxman and the tenant do the heavy lifting while you spend your free time with family and friends.
So the slow and easy path, mate.
Definitely. So it's really best suited to, I guess, time poor, family focused investors who have decent equity and decent income, but probably don't have the knowledge and most importantly the time that they need to put into this exercise to be more than passive in the exercise. So that's really where I would sum it up, I guess.
Yeah, and look, as I see it, and from when I went through that part of my journey, as I said, I did 20 years, there's really, even in the investing approach, there's still multiple pathways. So there's, I guess, your capital growth, where you can become asset rich, and then there's cash flow, where that allows you to put food on the table, mate. And I guess there's pros and cons of each of those. We'll dive into that a little bit later, but I guess each person has got their own little journey, even when they're on that path. Now, from property development perspective, ours is about forcing value onto the property. So by seeing untapped potential and turning one thing into, I guess, many things. Or alternatively, even a basic renovation is technically still a property development, albeit somewhat smaller in nature. So what we're trying to do, and everyone thinks as property developers as the evil, I guess the evil people who rape and pillage the earth. But what people don't really realize is property developers are the makers of community. We are the people who build the houses that people will then eventually either live in or invest in. So our audience is your investor. Our audience is the mums and dads that actually want to live there. So our job is to actually understand, I guess, where the city is going, how the city is changing, the evolving needs of our community, and being able to put that solution in front of someone before they actually realize they need it. Now, all the very same things that you touched on with regards to infrastructure, they are the core tenements of what we are doing, but we're getting in first. So we're seeing the opportunity before everybody else does, and we're maximizing that opportunity. If we go back in time, and don't quote me on I guess the exact math here, but if we go back 230 odd years, Australia was a one lot land subdivision. So if you think about it, every house, every school, every shopping centre, every road has been built by a property developer seeing the need of the community and putting that solution in front of them before they realise they need it.
100%, and I think there's never been a greater need or better time for governments at all levels to actually start treating property developers and investors as a slipstream to that, as their best friends, not their worst enemies. Because
we are allies on that department. So I'm going to lay down the gloves right now, Bushy. Let's beat up on some politicians, shall we? Look, and it's not very fair to put them all in the same basket. Different states have different approaches and different pros and cons and that sort of thing. But if we were to generalize, I think they see both of us as profiteering, and as such, we are a piggy bank for them to tap into to top up their coffers, as opposed to we are providing the housing solution that is the problem that they have created.
100%. You and I both know that it's a supply issue we have in this country, nothing else. All the governments want to do is throw money at demand, and all it's doing is making things worse. So the latest round, I just shook my head the other week when the ACTU and the Greens again are raising this issue of having a crack at negative gearing and the capital gains discount. Just seriously, when we've got a massive and growing housing shortage, to be attacking the very people who provide 90% of the stock makes zero sense to me. So rather than winding it back, that we should be winding it up, just like how it did way back in the 80s to make sure that we overcome this growing housing affordability and rental crisis. So I could spend an hour talking about that, Rob. I don't want to get on too much of a tangent, but the cutting off the nose despite the face activities at a lot of levels of government, just that naivety, it just incomprehensible from where I sit, to be quite frank, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, well, look, we have started an initiative at the start of this year to actually start lobbying, I guess, the different state governments around the country and also local government with regards to becoming an industry advocate for small-scale mum and dad developers. Until now, there has never been an industry representation for them. And so we've got a member base of 32,000 people at this moment in time. We've been running for 13 plus years, and a lot of the governments didn't know that we even existed. But now that we've started having these conversations, we are on the panel for Queensland in the Building Ministerial Advisory Council. We're now on the panel for the New South Wales government for Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, the Victorian government for, I guess, the Department of Transport and Planning. I'm trying to remember all these acronyms, mate. It's very difficult. We're also with Brisbane City Council, helping them doing a whole bunch of planning for their rezoning initiatives and that sort of thing. And finally, they're starting to recognise that we are the antidote to the problem that's sitting in front of them, being the housing crisis. Now, unfortunately, there are different layers of government and different, probably more silos of government, where the Treasury Department doesn't really talk to the Planning Department. So Planning Department says, hey, we've got this great initiative, and the Treasury Department says, and that's the way we can tap into that. So I think there are the individual silos that are, I guess, doing all the right things, and I really genuinely want to compliment them on some of the initiatives that they're doing. And I've got a 2-day event coming up in a couple of weeks called Developer Launchpad, where I'm going to go deep diving into some of the new initiatives that have been coming out. But there are other silos in government that unfortunately are also the handbrake. So it's
the old analogy of allowing a CFO or an accountant to run a business has its limitations, shall we say. That's probably enough said to some degree. But that tunnel vision that comes out of just worrying about the beans rather than the opportunity is where the issue sits, and it seems to permeate across the exercise, and property developers and property investors become the convenient donkey to pin the tail on, basically. So I really commend what you're doing in that space, Rob. Let's make sure that we'll be re-leveraging this conversation out through the Property Hub after it's gone live tonight, and it'll be really good to make sure we've got the links in there, because I know there'll be a lot of people who'll be going, didn't know about this, let's get on board with this. So, I've talked about PICA or the Property Investment Council of Australia quite extensively over the years, and the need to create a lobby group at the investor level, but to have someone in the development space that's doing the same thing and at the table making those key decisions is going to be great. So let's make sure we share the opportunities for people to get on board.
Absolutely. You mentioned PICA. I know that you're a former board member of PICA. I am now a current board member of PICA. So we're in the same fight, mate. Yeah.
Fantastic.
That said, we promised our audience blood, and so far we've not laid a glove on each other. So
bit of shadow dancing going on here now.
So let's put the gloves back on, tap fists, and let's get on with the show, my friend. Okay, now slightly different approach to investing versus developing. So developing, we need a lot of knowledge. We need a lot of sweat equity. A lot of, I guess, grunt goes into the actual effort. Whereas your guys are sitting back, they're doing a little bit of research up front, and they're largely letting the market do the work. So pros and cons of letting the market do the work, mate. What are the opportunities and challenges for letting the market do the work?
Yeah, okay. Well, let's jump into that in a bit of detail. So if we look at the pro side of the long-term hold, buy and long-term hold equation, I guess the obvious one, and stating the bleeding obvious, is that time is a great forgiver. So as an investor, you're more worried about the climate that your property is in, not the weather. So we're not worried about what changes are happening in the economy or whatnot short term. We're taking a long-term view, and we're expecting that there's going to be ups and downs. But if we're holding on to it long enough, then we're going to come out okay. So it de-risks it a little bit from that perspective. I guess the other exercises from an investment point, generally, I'm making some big generalizations here because everyone's individual position is going to be different. But in terms of the investment versus property development side, normally you need lower equity and quite often a lower income requirement to buy a 3 or 4 bedroom home than to get into a development. The level of equity can be 6 times less if you're buying one property versus doing a 4-pack or something similar. Similarly, the servicing income required. So I guess the entry hurdles to get into this are probably lower than the development side. And realistically, you probably need a lower rainy day reserve to cover yourself holding a property. You still got to have one. So 6 months worth of living expenses plus the costs associated with the property and making sure that you've got some CapEx requirement for repairs and maintenance needs to be there. Secondly, generally you need a lower experience to get in, and most importantly, less time load effectively. So your role, if you've bought a good quality property and you've got a good team that's supporting you, then you shouldn't be spending much more than 1 or 2 hours a month looking after the exercise, and probably 4 hours at the end of the year pulling together stuff to give to the accountant. So from a time perspective, it works. It allows you to put what limited time you have. If you're time poor and you're raising a family, then you want to be spending the very limited free time you've got with them and your friends, enjoying life rather than creating a second job. So it's got that going for it. There's some pretty handy tax breaks that come into the investor space. So we've mentioned already the negative gearing and the CGT discounts that are applied to it. You get an immediate cash flow out of an investment exercise rather than potentially wait a couple of years and carry it in the meantime if you're going down the development road. There's price clarity from comparisons with similar properties of comparable needs. So there's a little bit more certainty that comes around it. Banks love the exercise, the fact that they're prepared to still borrow up to 95% of the value of a property speaks volumes in terms of being a safe haven as far as the banks are concerned. The other great benefit is that compounding works while you sleep. So if you just sit back and let time, the tenant, the tax man do the work, then you can do so, and it's scalable as long as you systemize the exercise. So we've had investors who are in a pretty strong position who can accumulate 5 properties within 12 months and then just sit back and let the work happen, but make sure that they're managing the key players of their team to make it happen. So that's really the pro side. Do you want me to cover the con side, or do you want to do that?
No, I'm gonna return serve on some of those. You've thrown a few barbs out there. I'm gonna see if I can bite on a couple of them, and then we can go into the con side of things. So time. You mentioned time was for your side. It was a healer of mistakes. So time forgives all, I think you said. For property development, that's actually a negative for us. Time is our enemy. So I guess holding costs hurt us. We need to have haste and I guess get on with the show because we're manufacturing profits. We want to get in and out as quick as humanly possible and minimize our exposure to the market. We want to have certainty on what our market conditions are. We don't want it fluctuating up and down because we don't know if it's going to go up and down. We want to know we can get in one market and get out in the same market so we can predict the outcome. So from that side of things, I'll give you one, right? It's a 1-0, right? But you threw one out there with regards to the money side of things and the perception of money being needed. I'm gonna give a very, very brief comment on it, and I'm going to park that because that's a whole topic I want to come back and have a deep dive on.
Okay.
And that is the perception that property development needs a lot of money. And if you're wanting to do it all with your cash, you're right. Okay. But I want to tell you that there are no less than 7 different ways that you can do deals with low or no money down that will help you to manufacture property, not by owning it, but by controlling it. So I'm going to just park that one there because that deserves a fight all in and of itself, mate.
Look forward to that.
Look forward to that too. So then the next one I think you touched on was the effort. So you are right. I'll give you 2-0 here. So from an effort perspective, small amount of research and to pick your area, and then you're sitting back and letting the market do the work. From our side of things, if you're not putting about 15 hours a week into the exercise, then you're probably not doing the process justice. Property development is effectively another career. You need to give it I guess the same way you do an apprenticeship in any other endeavor that you want to actually go in. You've got to put the runs on the board to educate yourself, because we make money by knowing what to do and then taking action in doing it. So the first part of that is really the I guess the knowledge side of things. So about 15 hours a week. If you can put 15 hours a week in, I'm going to say at the 6-month mark, you'll be competent, but not confident. Confidence comes from practice and repetition. If you keep doing it again and again and again, then you're going to build that confidence level. And typically we will find that about the 9-month mark, people start to get the confidence that they can believe that they can do this themselves and take that on. And so there's a whole conversation around beliefs that we can probably dive into at the moment. But then I guess to try and get a couple of points back, mate, the speed at which we are doing the project means that we are manufacturing profits in much less time. So the quickest deal I have ever run in my entire life, I made $190,000 in 6 weeks from contract signing to cash in the bank, having sold the finished product. Now that is the exception. They're not all that fast, but we can do deals in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Deals can turn over with 6-figure profits in that timeline. Yeah. And so if you put the effort in, the reward can be there. If you don't put the effort in, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is a way to blow yourself up real fast. If you don't, so the risk is high if you don't educate yourself in that process. So I think I don't know who the person is who quoted this, mate, but you either pay through education up front and learn how to do it properly, or you pay by making the mistakes along the way. Either way, you're paying.
Yes, that's a great way to look at it. I think it comes down to the from an investor's perspective, the speed versus the stress, I guess. And let's face it, following on from your point, if you've invested in your knowledge first before you've invested in bricks and mortar in whatever format, then you're going to de-risk it and reduce the stress. But if you need to be happy taking on a second job, I think, and that's I'm glad you're raising it, because I think that's a really important point. Because there'll be a lot of people who, once they get their hands dirty with the development piece, that will, and I'm sure you could share a lot of stories about this with people who that becomes their main job once they get up and running, because they enjoy it so much, they're getting so much satisfaction out of their controlling their own destiny through doing it. But for those that think this is just something they can do on the side with a few hours a week, then that's where they're really going to paint themselves into a bit of trouble.
Yeah, as I said, you need at least 15 hours a week to do it justice. Otherwise, you're not really doing it well. Most people will come in as a side hustle, and kind of do that whilst they keep their day job. Then they find out that one project effectively doubles their wage, and they go, well, if that's the case, I've just increased my nest egg and gave my mortgage a very big nudge. Maybe if I do that one more time, I might knock my mortgage out, and then that's going to prove to me that I don't need a day job. So if I'm doing it 15 hours a week, and I'm getting those sorts of results, imagine what I get if I could do it 40 hours a week. Noting I still had those extra 15 hours before, so why don't I keep them in the kitty? So you start doing 40 to 50 hours a week towards this process, and you start to accelerate fast.
Yeah, no, love that. I guess the speed exercise, and it's something I'd just like to test with you while we're still going softly on the gloves. The timing exercise, I guess, given the environment that Australia's been in post-COVID, and you would have had this question 1,000 times, but the level of issues that are around the building industry, the cost blowing out, the inability to lock in fixed price contracts, the issues around delays in approvals, because time is money effectively, depending on how you structure it. What's your thoughts around those in terms of how someone who's interested in development could see their way to navigate through that?
Firstly, those things are real and they did happen, and I guess they have I'll call it an afterglow that is still sitting there where people are, I guess, alert to what's happening. The construction cost blowout that happened during COVID was a result of an artificial recession with everybody being locked down. So what that meant is that the manufacturing plant only produced half as much stuff. When it did produce it, when it got to the port, only half as much shipping actually went out the door. When it got to the other end, only half as much shipping got processed. And then when it got, I guess, to the local, the local destination, every government had printed money and said, housing bonus, you should all be building. So that created a huge demand for the material, but there was hardly any material there. So that rocketed the price points up massively. So now all those supply chains are back to normal. I guess the demand is back to equilibrium. There's no more governments printing money, giving insane bonuses in those sorts of departments. So we have stabilized back to normality from our construction costs. Now, will they go back to what they were before? No. Now that the builders have worked out that they can charge that sort of money and people are paying it, they're going to keep charging that sort of money. And so will all the suppliers. Unfortunately, I guess where we've really got to is, I guess, the knock-on effect of COVID meant because there were fixed price contracts, a lot of builders went broke because they couldn't absorb the impact of that. So there's half as many builders around today than there were 5 years ago. And so the builders that are left have a lot of demand on their services, which means that the labor component is the most expensive component of everything in the construction game at the moment. But again, it's, I guess, a managed risk. Okay. You can never ever eliminate risk, but you can identify it, you can manage it, and you can and do still get fixed price contracts. The banks only want fixed price contracts. There are certain places for, I guess, contracts with variations that sit around them, what they call cost plus, but they are rarities. The builder will always try their luck and ask for it. But when you push back and say bank won't fund that, most of the time they will yield, but every now and then they find someone who's cashed up and they can take that, I guess, as far as they can.
Yeah, like the flow-on question there, Rob, because again, I'm talking from general perception here, because I think this is a really good conversation to reset expectations around the build piece, because there's still that hangover legacy from the wild times post-COVID that people have got this sort of immediate fear when you talk about anything building, actually. But if the reality on the ground is that things have settled down, one of the big benefits, and you sort of touched on it, is really building at wholesale and then selling it at retail, so you can effectively lock in some immediate equity on when you turn the property over. There's a perception again that the costs are too high now. You can't. It's going to cost you more to build than it is to buy. I'd love to perhaps you to reframe that, because we've also seen the values of properties jump massively, pretty much across the board over the same period of time. So is it still, if someone steps up to the plate today, are they in a position as they were pre-COVID where they could effectively, if they're smart about the feasibility, build below market value and manufacture equity off the bat?
Well, that is the entire purpose of what property development does, is to do exactly that. So the answer, in short, is yes.
Yeah.
But there's a caveat that sits behind that. Okay, and the caveat is that 90% of the sites that are developable are not profitable.
Yeah.
And that's because there are markets within markets within markets, and supply and demand for different product in different area means that not everything will work in all locations. And so what we tend to find is people have a preconceived idea that they want to do a particular kind of development, whatever that is. And for the moment, I'm going to say duplex. Okay.
Yeah.
But I want to do a duplex, and they have, I guess, a romantic love for a location because they grew up in it, they know it well, they do, and so they go, I want to do this duplex in that location, and they try to marry the two together, and it doesn't necessarily work. Whereas something else in that location might have. So maybe a basic land subdivision might have worked, maybe a knockdown rebuild might have worked, but the duplex thing didn't, right? Instead, if they had have said, well, I want to do a duplex, where does the duplex work? Then they could actually start looking at lots of different locations and say, okay, I can find the exact spot that the duplex works. So we've all heard the term hot spotting, right? So the whole point of hot spotting is not, hey, it's just taking off, but it's the specific strategy in the specific location that's taking off. And I think people forget that, right? So the traditional hot spotting that is promoted is, I guess, the long-term capital growth type approach. But if you're doing cash flow, that hot spotting doesn't work. There's different hot spotting. If you're trying to do a knockdown rebuild, that's a different kind of hot spotting. So what you are doing determines where it works.
One of it, mate, you are singing my tune, because even in the investment space, we say ignore the hotspots. It's nonsense. Work out what is your affordability, what purchase price can you achieve, then find the highest growth vehicle, which is generally a 3 or 4 bedroom home, at that price point in an area around the country. So not your backyard, but be borderless and look at the 15,000 different suburbs around the country. To find an area that has those 3 eyes of growth attached to it. So I'm not worried about what happened in the rearview mirror. We're worried about what's going to happen in the future. So infrastructure, industry diversity, and strong and growing income profiles. Take that top-down scarcity approach but don't go, right, I live in suburb X, I'm going to buy a property in suburb X, and then expect you're going to get the sorts of results that you take if you take that more refined, optimized position that you've just mentioned, that's just as relevant to the property development piece.
So we're pretty much saying the same things, but for different strategies. So if you take that exact same approach, don't be mile wide and inch deep. Be inch wide and mile deep. What is the one thing you want to do? Where does that one thing work? How do I learn that one skill? What are the one set of rules for the one council that I want to do that with? So if I look at any kind of development strategy at all, Bushy, and there's a ton of different development strategies, there are 537 councils in the country, which means there's 537 different sets of rules for that same one thing. So no matter what I want to do, I want to lock down what I want to do. I want to lock down the council that I want to do it in. And then I want to become an area expert in that and find 3 suburbs, just 3, where there's lots of opportunity, evidence of other people doing it, proof those people are profitable, and enough demand that I want to take it on myself. Now, if we can do that, that's the 10% that I'm talking about. 10% are profitable. It takes a while to find it, but when you do, almost every deal is a knock it out of the park deal.
I love it. I love the focus on the quality, not the quantity exercise, and that narrow and deep approach, because they are just as applicable to property developments as they are in the investment space, and even more so in the investment space now. We've seen, because the rising tide has lifted all ships in the last few years, it's even more important now to get really focused on matching your capacity to the highest growth opportunity if you're going to do well, because if you don't, then there's a lot of people who are going to be very sadly disappointed and let down, because one of the other fallacies that around the property investment piece is that property doubles every 10 years. Well, that's bollocks. You actually
pick the right place.
Yeah, yep. If you do the research, the average time it takes to go through a full growth cycle is 15 years. So you might get lucky. And people, and sadly, we have a generation of new players in property that have come in post-COVID that think that, it just goes up 20% a year, because that's pretty much what we've seen across the board. Well, that fuse and that petrol's just about burnt out. So apart from the what I call the property Pied Pipers, who are high-profile buyers agents who are putting their crosshairs on various suburbs and then herding people in to fight each other to artificially build up prices for a short term. If you avoid that and you're a contrarian and you look at the fundamentals of growth that we spoke about, then you need to be much more careful about what you're doing and where you're doing it and how you're setting it up. So the right location, the right property and the right structure to actually achieve the results that you're intending to. So it's not an easy game now. I think it's a more difficult pathway, given we've effectively brought forward in 3 or 4 years post-COVID, we brought forward 10 years worth of normal growth.
Yeah, I'd say there was a short period of time where we did, a huge amount of construction side of things. But unfortunately, there was a whole bunch of lack of supply that kind of led into this. And whilst it's not our fight, I'll just give everyone a little bit of background. Pre-COVID, Australia was actually in, a little bit of economic trouble. And that's when all the interest rates dropped down to near on zero. Okay, so they were trying to stimulate the market. Now, because the economy was not doing great, property developers don't tend to do a lot of property development in that time. And so there were not a lot of development applications lodged during that period of time. Okay, so there was a lack of potential supply. So development approval is potential supply, it's not actual supply. Then we went into COVID, and every economist on earth and every bank was saying we could drop 20 or 30% in our property prices. And again, no developer in their right mind was going to get in and do any development at that point in time when you're going to guarantee to lose your shirt. And so again, no development approvals were coming through. Then the government said, hang on, this artificial recession we've just triggered, we need to reinvigorate the economy. They created an artificial boom with the building bonus. And so the limited amount of development approvals that were there suddenly all got constructed at once. And so it consumed that potential supply, and the cost of construction went up, builders started going broke, deals didn't make sense anymore. And again, in a very, very short period of time, we went back to no developers doing any development applications again. It's only now that they've said, hey, we need to solve this problem in a more permanent basis, and they've started bringing international migrants in to create some genuine demand.
Yeah.
It's only now that developers are starting to do the actual development approvals again. But it's about 5 years of lack of supply in the pipeline that's led to the housing crisis that we're actually in. So anyone who's been watching me and my YouTube channel for a long period of time, I do, something called Developer Launchpad, which I do twice a year, and I do an event called Over the Horizon, where I predict where I think the market is going somewhere into the future based on all the underlying fundamentals and 16 drivers that are actually sitting here. So I've been predicting this housing crisis coming for a good couple of years, and it's actually here. And now all the governments are starting to recognize that, and so they're all scrambling to change the legislation to enable developers to actually do what they do best and actually construct. And so there's a whole bunch of changes that are happening in pretty much every single state that basically is trying to open the floodgates and said, we need more development approvals, we need more construction actually happening. And so the tide has turned, and we're starting to actually get back on the right path again.
Fantastic. Great time to be in property. And I think the flow-on benefit for both those interested in property development and investment, because they're going to be linked essentially in that sense, is to make sure that if you're a developer or an investor, you're buying or developing the right type of property in the right location at the right time. Because one of the issues I have seen in the past is whether these blanket incentives from various levels of government, and all they're worried about is the numbers of the housing units, not the location, the quality, and the appropriateness of the property solutions to the people on the ground. So I guess I'm cautioning anyone who's looking at this to be very careful about where you do it and what you do it and how you structure it to make sure you're optimizing the outcome.
Well, I'll go back to my opening statement. What is property development? We are the makers of community, and it's your job to actually understand the demographic of what is needed and create the right product in that location. So if you're not creating the right product, you deserve to not get the success. We need to do that research and make sure that we're putting the right thing in the right place. And only if we solve somebody's problem will we get paid.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point. And it's even pointier end on the property development side, because if you misread that, wrong type of property at the wrong price point in the wrong location at the wrong time, that's a world of pain. If you get it right, there's a world of opportunity and profit.
Now, back to this fight thing, mate. There was something that you said in the middle of that I had to wait very patiently for to kind of have a retort for. You said that for an investor, you're trying to choose a location based on their affordability and what they can actually do. Okay. And I said before I was going to park the issue about how do you do this with little to no money. And so it's time for me to come out swinging. So in a traditional investing approach, you're purchasing a property and trying to justify to a bank that you're going to be able to afford to hold that for 20 or 30 years. Yeah. And because of that, you need a huge deposit and you need the serviceability to be able to fund that over that 20 or 30 year period. Yeah. But in property development, we're doing this in a very short period of time, and we're manufacturing our profits. And because we're manufacturing our profits, lots of people want to come in and help us to actually solve that problem. And there's many, many ways that we can do that with some very creative acquisition strategies and some very creative investment approaches to actually solve that problem. So the key to the solution here, my friend, is control and not ownership. If I control it, I don't necessarily need the deposit and I don't necessarily need the serviceability. Yep. And there's many, many, many ways to control the property. Can I throw just a couple at you?
Whet your appetite.
Whet your appetite. Okay, so if you were a boomer that's had the great Aussie dream, the big backyard and all that sort of thing, you're now at an age where that big backyard's becoming a pain in the butt. And chances are you grew up in a time when there was no such thing as a self-managed super fund, and you've got no money in the bank, and that one asset is the one thing that you want to cash in on and get the most amount of money. Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if I was to give you a solution where I could give you a little bit more money for your property, given that time is on your side, you've been holding this for a long period of time, would you be interested in working with me to try and get a better outcome for you?
Yeah, that's
So let's do a very basic math equation, because I'm a very basic man and I like simple math. Okay, let's just say your property is worth $1 million, Bushy.
Yep.
If I bought that today, interest rates are about 6.5%.
Yeah.
If my project was going to take 12 months to run, that would mean that I'd give 65,000 to Commonwealth Bank. I'd probably give 10,000 to, I guess, the local council in rates. I'd probably give another 15,000 to, I guess, the Office of State Revenue and Land Tax.
Yep.
And so I'm probably in the vicinity of about $100,000 in holding costs before I even start to run my project. Yes?
Yep, spot on.
But if I said, hey, Bushy, what I'm going to do is not actually going to impact you very much. I need to fix up some fence lines. I need to dig up your backyard. You can stay living there. And if you allow me to purchase this in 12 months' time, I'm going to save $100,000 in holding costs. I'm going to happily give that money to you, my friend. Now, if I do that, you're going to get 1.1 mil. So you're happy. That's capital gains tax free for you. I've improved my cash flow. I didn't need my deposit today. I didn't need the serviceability. In the meantime, I've run my project all the way through to completion, and I'm selling the finished product before I even owned the first product, and I'm able to pay you out with the income from the outgoing property.
Love it.
Now, that's just one way of many, many ways to actually solve the problem. What I want people to start to think about is how do I be resourceful when I haven't got the resources, right? So what is the problem on the person on the other end of the equation, the person selling the property? What problem do they have, and how can I help them solve that? And if I can help them solve that, there might be a way for me to I guess, acquire or control that property without ever needing to actually purchase it.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. So a variation on that theme, Bushy. So have you purchased the next place that you're going to? And are you likely to be downsizing and staying in the same area? There's a good chance that I'm going to be building the exact product that you want. So I could buy it off you, pay stamp duty, go and build it, all those holding costs, and then sell it back to you, pay more stamp duty. That doesn't make sense. What if instead I build you the house on the left and I get to keep the house on the right, and by me building you the house on the left, I don't need to purchase it off you. I only need to purchase half of it off you. And not only that, I physically can't purchase the second half off you until it exists. And so I have to go through the construction period and the subdivision period, and only at the end can I actually purchase half of it off you. And at that point, you've got your brand new home already constructed. Now, if I'm doing that, chances are I can actually tap into the equity of your home in order to secure my construction loan.
Love it.
So many, many, many ways to solve this problem, mate. As I said, there's 7 different ways that we teach people they can do deals with little to no money, but it's about understanding the problem of the person who's actually selling the property. Where are they situated with regards to, I guess, their next stages in life? What is their urgency? What is their, I guess, ability to deal with complexity of a contract? What is their risk appetite, and how much money do they want? And when we blend all of those, is there one of the 7 tools in my toolbox that I can actually pull out and actually offer them to get that deal done?
Yeah, that's a real win-win all round. There's no question about it. A bit like the difference between a one-night stand and a marriage. It'll be the paperwork and the prenup that really defines how good that outcome is for both parties. So I assume that part of that toolkit is to make sure that the legal...
without doubt. The legals have to be tight for both sides. And it's important. The best contract is one that you never need to refer to, exactly. But it's also one that has looked at every single permutation of what could go wrong, worked out what are the parties going to do should that occur, and then do everything humanly possible to make sure it doesn't.
I love it. I love the lateral thinking, because with the great balloon of downsizers coming through the system, who are asset rich, income poor, the ability to utilise that homegrown asset to do all of those things that you've just mentioned, that's going to be very palatable and very attractive to a lot of people.
Well, their asbestos riddled fibro shed that's leaking in the middle of winter probably needs to be upgraded, mate. The number of people who are on, $2-3 million properties, and you look at the property itself and it's a hovel.
Yeah.
What can we do to improve the quality of their lifestyle? There's no point being asset rich and not having the lifestyle that comes with it.
Totally.
So if we, in that situation, I could build them a brand new home that would still be worth the same sort of money that the original home was, but now no maintenance, all brand new, all under warranty, nice and warm in the middle of winter, no maintenance. It's a win for everyone.
100%. No, I love the thinking there that it's ticking all the boxes as far as that goes. So I'm having trouble disagreeing with you, Rob, if you haven't noticed. So it's not much of a debate because everything we've talked about, we're on the same page. So that gets a little bit into something I wouldn't, and this might not be the right time in the context of how you like the conversation to go, but at the appropriate time, let's sort of run through the key parameters that an investor, or the GPS sliders that an investor needs to be thinking about to decide whether they're going to go down the development road or the investment route or a hybrid somewhere in between. When do you want to do that?
Let's do that now, mate. You've opened the door. Let's kick it down.
Yeah, I think it's worth setting the tone, because what's been very evident, I think, from the discussion we've already had is that there is no one size fits all, and it's not investment or property development. It's investment and property development at the appropriate time for the appropriate position. So I think to sort of break that down, something that, and again, you've probably got your own approach, so we might compare the two, but I often refer to it as the 9 decision point nonograms. A nonogram is just a geometric shape that's got 9 points on it. And I normally get investors, but it's just as applicable with this in relation to how passive or how active they want to get, is to rate themselves against these key 9 parameters. So the first of those is goal clarity. So you just want to live comfortably at some point down the track when you retire, which I would call a fuzzy goal. So I'd rate that low. Or are you crystal clear and you need 200 grand in 12 months' time? So that's both ends of the scale. So that's the first of the non-again parameters. The second, and probably the one that I see the least attended to, and we've touched on it already in our discussion so far, is the time availability that the actual individual has. So as we've already touched on, there's no point jumping into development if you're not able to put 15 plus hours in a week. But if you're flat out at work and you're chasing your career and ambition, and you've got a growing family, and the little bit of time you've got, you want to spend with them on the weekend, and you've only got 2 or 3 hours a week, then investment's going to be a safer bet for where you're heading. The next thing is the investment timeline. So if you're happy to sit for 15 years or so and let property do its work while you're getting on with life, then investment's the approach. If you've come out of divorce like you and I did early on in the piece, Rob, and you need to be manufacturing equity to sort of turbocharge things quick, and you need to do it in a couple of years' time or less, then obviously you need to be more aggressive and more active, and property development is going to be a better fit. The next one is then the capacity piece. So
it gets tricky where they want it fast and they're not willing to do the work, mate. That's
yes, and that's the great fallacy. I think if you want to happen quick, you're going to need to be active, and you're also going to have to make sure that you've spent enough time to understand the risks associated with the potential rewards that you're doing. The next one is around the capacity piece. So, I mean, you've already sort of deconstructed that a little bit in terms of the no cash deals that people can get into, and the fact that development finance is based on the deal, not the individual. So there are certain elements of there. I guess one of the things that I wouldn't mind you expanding on, and again, this is probably a trap that not a lot of people think about, is if they're getting into a development and they're going to say build 3, sell sell to or retain some, then don't forget the trigger piece when the last property's on the table that you're going to pass a serviceability and capacity test at that point. That's when I think, again,
I've got an antidote to that, my friend.
Great. Yeah, fire away.
So I'm going to ask you a loaded question, Bushy. So you've heard about us greedy property developers. We're always hungry for money, mate. What is the stereotypical profit on cost margin that you hear property developers are aiming for?
Well, I hear various, but it's generally around the sort of 12 to 15% mark.
Well, most of them are aiming for 20. So 12 to 15, they're a little tight on, mate. Might struggle getting some funding there, but typically it's 20%. So there is a mathematical formula that says, based on a 20% profit on cost, there's a magic number of 6. If you do 6, if you sell 5, it pays the cost. The 6th one is owned free and clear.
Go.
So then how do you learn how to do 6? You learn how to do 4. How do you learn how to do 4? You learn how to do 2.
Yeah.
So within 3 deals, you can own an asset outright.
Providing, as you said before, and I think this is a challenge, and it may be settling down because I'm not close enough to it, but it's been very challenging to make 2 work because of holding costs and everything else. To actually make it stack up 2 has been challenging, and then the other exercise that listeners will need to get their head around is that once you go beyond 4, if you've been assuming that you're using the standard banks to fund the exercise, most of the banks, as soon as you go beyond 4, it's in the commercial space, and so
they want it to be commercial space. But there's antidotes to that with regards to how you structure your deals with potentially multiple entities and potentially multiple banks across the balance of stock as well. Equally, you could go commercial lending. Commercial lending doesn't really care about, I guess, your serviceability. What they care about is the profitability of the deal, and they're looking at the deal and the deal's merits. And so long as you can do that, then they will actually then fund the deal as well. So lots of different ways to skin that cat, mate.
Love that.
So the cat's dead.
Love that. The next parameter, number 5 of the nonogram, is it comes down to cash flow affordability, and that's about buffers, accommodating vacancies, overruns, all the other bits and pieces. What I'm hearing from you is that if we're in the commercial development space, and that's all funded in to the exercise, you've just got to manage the time constraints around the exercise to make sure there's no blowouts. I'm assuming, and probably pre-sales comes into that to some degree as well. Do you want to sort of add some colour to that one?
Yeah, so pre-sales is a really interesting one. Some banks will mandate that you must have pre-sales. Pre-sales are challenging to get because you're selling something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Your valuer is going to be conservative on what he thinks it's worth.
Yeah.
The purchaser is going to be conservative because they can't see, they can't touch it, they can't feel it, they can't smell it. So they're trusting you to build it to the quality that you're promising. So generally they're going to ask for a discount, and typically you're not selling through a traditional agent, you're selling it through I guess a project marketer, so they're wanting higher commissions.
Yeah.
So you actually lose a lot of the revenue by pre-selling. Okay, but I guess what you do is you take a lot of risk off the table. Okay, so you've got the certainty in the outcome of the project. Now, if you're in a falling market, that certainty is super important. Okay. And because you want to make sure that no matter what happens, you're going to get that sale away. If you're in a rising market, that certainty becomes a problem for you because what you've done is you've capped your profits. So you want to take a balanced view of that and say, well, if the bank doesn't actually mandate that I need the pre-sale, where do I think the market's going? And do I want to, I guess, de-risk it by selling now? Or do I want to potentially maximize my profit and let it ride based on my view on where I think the market's going? Okay, so that is a risk position that each person will have a different answer to. Some people go like, I want all the risk off the table, and I'm only going to go construct when I know that I can actually cash flow it through to the end. that's great. It's going to be profitable, just won't be as profitable. For those who have kahunas of steel and they want to, I guess, take it all on and I guess put all the chips in and put it all on 26 red, then those guys have the potential to actually knock it out of the park. They also have the potential to, I guess, go completely under. And so you've got to take a very balanced view on where you sit on those things.
Yeah, no, well said. The next one on the non-gram is personal capability. So that's about your experience, your execution confidence. So if you've got none, you're a beginner, then obviously the investment road is a lower risk exercise. If you have it all, you're prepared to do the work, as you mentioned before, about educating yourself, or this goes hand in hand with the number 7, which is your team expertise and strength. If you've got the right team around you who fill in the gaps for the areas that you don't have, but you need to be good at managing that team to make sure that they're acting in your interests and not theirs or someone else's, then that gives you more scope to move closer to the more active side. And the big elephant in the room is... Sorry,
I've got a huge commentary on that, mate.
Yes.
So I agree with the sentiment and the statement. There's a couple of potential gotchas that I think I see a lot of people fall for.
Yeah.
And that is the difference between delegation and abdication.
Totally.
So, and it really comes down to the education piece that should be a prerequisite. So if you do not understand what your consultants are doing or what your team is doing, then you are abdicating the decisions to them. You don't know whether or not the decision they come back to you with is a good decision or a bad decision.
Totally.
But if you educate yourself beforehand, then delegate away, because now you've got the leverage of other people working for you, and you can quality assure the work that they're doing to make sure it's actually good work. So I'm very much in favor of getting a great team around you and having that team do the work, and me sitting back and not doing as much work and just being the conductor of the orchestra.
Yeah.
But I did my music degree. I know how to conduct the audience. I'm not just out there just waving a stick in the air and hoping I play Beethoven's Fifth. You know, it's kind of one of those things where you need to do some prerequisite work before you go and engage those teams to make sure that you're getting the right team.
100%. And using that same analogy, you need to be able to basically play each instrument to a level that you don't need to be good at it, but being able to synthesize then what's being suggested by that particular musician to make sure that it is actually in harmony with the overall symphony is absolutely key. And it's, you know, as we talked about off air, sadly, one of the things that the KnowHow group and myself personally do for investors now is become that watchdog and guide dog, because there are, sadly, and people use the time poor excuse of, well, I don't have time, so they must be good at it, so I'll just let them go. And they're outsourcing not only the action but the intellect. They need to maintain the intellect part, but just outsource the arms and legs to do it. That's why we by need rather than desire, offer an opportunity now for people to use us in that capacity. So to sit on their side of the table and validate what's being suggested, to make sure that what's being suggested truly is in the best interest of that particular developer or investor from our perspective. But point very well made. And I'll rush through the last couple of these. The eighth is, and definitely important in the exercise, is risk appetite. Now, risk appetite is normally overcome with knowledge. So coming back to your point, if you do the homework and you educate yourself, then the higher your knowledge increases, the less risk there is, because you know what you're getting into. Risk is only really around the stuff that you don't know or think you know that you don't. So that's pretty important.
I can give a great analogy for that, mate, that people really easily pick up. So when you were a kid, you were taught that crossing the road was dangerous, yes?
Yeah.
But then you were taught if you look left and look right and look left again, you could then navigate how and when to cross the road safely. Now, the car is no less dangerous, but you identified the risk, you put a risk management plan in place, and as you crossed the road, you watched the traffic, so you were managing the risk as you went. Okay. Yeah. Now, now that you know how to do that, you can also press the button and wait for the little green man. You can go to a crossing. You can also do that. So it's about educating yourself to identify the risk. Then you can put the management plan in place, because only when you see the problem can you then go, what do I do about that?
100%. That's about planning for the worst and then managing for the best. So that you're looking at all the what-if scenarios and you've got contingencies and risk mitigation in place to cover it, then there pretty much isn't a risk, because you know that when that happens, this is what we're going to do about it. So totally agree. The last one, and also important, I think, is that number 9 is drive and energy. So are you a hands-on operator who loves challenges, is a great communicator, loves the cut and thrust of what's going on, or are you a set and forget lifestyle first person who just wants to get this property thing to do its thing while you're getting on with life? Now, I'm being a little bit oversimplified and extreme in the descriptions there, but if we look at all of those sliders and we combine those, then that really tracks down to 3 options that within that. So at one end, we've got the investor first, which is the simple set and forget. It's low time, low knowledge, low risk, long horizon, strong bankability, and you're just going to let compounding do its work. At the other end is the full bore property development exercise. So yes, it's high time, it's high risk tolerance, but manageable. It's having a proven, experienced A team in place that you are all over, and you're treating it like a business, not a one-off proposition. In between those is the hybrid, where you might have moderate time. You can taste test the development piece with renos or subdivisions or granny flats. And you've also got a developing team as your knowledge increases and your comfort level comes through that. So if we boil that down to because I think the time factor is the one that gets overlooked the most. So if you're less than 3 hours a week and you've got low risk appetite and you've got average capacity, invest. If you have 8+ hours and big buffers and you love wrangling with moving parts, jump into development. If you're somewhere in between, and you've got an emerging team, then a hybrid might be the way to go over term. So I think that the key questions that people need to ask themselves, and again, I'm sure you've covered this in the development piece, but before you do anything, why are you investing? What's the outcome by when that you're looking for? What must the next property contribute to that end game? And we're looking immediately about brand equity, yield, and the timeline. How much or many more of these will you need after this one to achieve the end game? And what can you truly commit in time, cash flow, and headspace to do it? And in addition to yourself, what team do you actually need, and who's missing from your team to achieve that? So they're probably if we use that sort of template to wrap around this.
That's your 9-step 9-point nonogram. So for anyone who's interested, I guess reach out to Bushy and his team via hello@knowhowproperty.com.au and ask for the 9-point nonogram. He will send you the 9-point nonogram, and you can actually engage with his team in that way, just to I guess get to know those elements. I guess the interesting one that you touched on right at the end there is I think it's very obvious when you're at one end or the other. So are you an investor or you're a developer? It's the guys in the middle that I want to talk to right now. So the guys in the middle who aren't quite sure, there are many ways that you can have an investor mindset with a property development approach. So by understanding the property development world and understanding how we operate and how a city is designed and how a city grows, you can be predicting where the population is going to next. So the land banking type opportunities. Now, I'm not just talking about just buying a big block of land in the middle of nowhere. That's far from it. But rather strategically understanding how a city is designed and knowing exactly which piece of land to be buying. And you might have to wait there for 5 or 10 years, but the city is going to get to you eventually, right? So by understanding that, you can be thinking like a developer, but acting like an investor. So that's going to give you, in maybe 10 years' time, 1 key today, but maybe 8 keys, 10 keys, 20 keys later on, okay? Just by being a little bit smarter.
Yeah.
Equally, there are those of you who've already made some money in the investment space, or maybe you were the one who bought that one and land banked it a while ago. It's developable, but you right now still don't want to put the time and effort in. That's when you reach out to someone like me or someone like the 32,000 we've got in our property developer network community, and you partner with a developer who's actually got some experience, and they will, I guess, share the profits of the project with you. So you're contributing your property, we're contributing our time, our knowledge, our skills, and our cash to actually run the deal. And we'll come to an arrangement with the profit split on that side. Or alternatively, if you've lifted your, I guess, net worth, perhaps you want to invest in one of our deals and go, hey, I like what those guys are doing, but I don't want to do it. I'm going to let them do what they do best. That is equally a way to tap into the property development cycle in order to tap into it. So it's the old small, medium, and large, or is it Goldilocks here, mate? So it's, it's not hot, it's not cold. They're just right. Who are those guys?
I love the multiple opportunities that you've created through your community to really look after individual needs that help someone else's needs. So and the multiple avenues. And I think the big takeaway from our discussion today is that there is no one size fits all, one model approach. It's get creative, step back, think about what you're going to achieve, and then in a community, in a creative community like yours that can look at various avenues to achieve that, don't get stuck in the old mindset of, I can't afford to buy another property. That's it, I'm done. There are ways and means that can both fast track and increase your capacity safely. If you're rubbing shoulders with similar people where you're putting that jigsaw together.
Yeah. Now, just because it's about 2-2 here, and I really want to win this fight, mate, I'm going to throw this final barb out there. So when I did the property investment world, I got to the point of being financially free after 20 years by property investing. So it does work. After I got divorced and I reloaded and I educated myself on property development, I did it in 6 years. And then going through the second divorce and knowing what I know now, I'm going to be able to do that again in 3, folks. I'm going to
hold you to that.
I'm still doing okay, mate. I'm just letting you know. She didn't knock me out. But I guess the point of the exercise being, if speed of getting to where you want to go is there, and if you're willing to put the effort in, then you can accelerate where you want to get to much, much faster. But it does come at the cost of effort. It does come at the cost of knowledge and actually putting the time and effort in to actually do that. So I'm gonna declare victory, mate. But I'm happy if you want to call it a draw.
I'm happy to hand you the brass plate, mate.
Hand me the throne. Look, in all seriousness, folks, property development doesn't suit everyone. Property investment doesn't suit anyone. There is a path for everyone all the way through here. And what we tend to find is people will start at one end of the spectrum, build some confidence, build some skills, build some cash, and then they'll graduate from one to the other. So no matter what end of the spectrum you are on, we've touched on this a couple of times along the way, you should educate yourself along the way. If you feel that you, I guess, align yourself with Bushy's camp, Bushy has, hang on, that's my camp. Bushy has his Freedom Formula course. If you want to learn how to, I guess, become an investor, the kinds of things to think about when you're doing investing, I guess give your Freedom course a plug, mate.
Thank you, mate. It's the why, what, and how. For others, I think there's other opportunities, and the awesome work that you're doing through what you're doing in that space, I think is second to none, Rob. I guess the key take home for me that I want people to endorse, whichever pathway they choose in property, is to choose an approach that matches your personality and your position. And that will change. It does evolve, but don't just get fixed in your head about which way you're going to go and go down a hill for leather. Because if you take a step back and take a helicopter view of this exercise, there's a world of opportunity there. It's choosing the right approach that suits you. And as your knowledge, comfort, position changes, so will the approach that you need to take in property. So you take it, and that's why I say it's a GPS, not a roadmap, because things will change over time. But if you've got the right instruments in front of you and the right people around it, then you'll be able to achieve your goals, whether they're in 2-3 years like yours, or you're happy to sit back and let it happen over 20.
Yeah, I'll add to that, mate. There's a lot of educators out there that will sell you a great course, and the course itself might be great. I'm not going to make any judgments there on that. But if it doesn't suit what you want to achieve, it doesn't matter how good the course is. So get very clear on what you want first. When you know what you want, then choose the education path and which educator is the best one for you. Don't believe the salesman at the front of the room. He might be the right guy for you. He might not be the right guy for you, either way. So if you think Bushy is the right guy, there's Bushy's Freedom Formula course. If, however, you think that I am the right guy, we have a 7-step formula to financial freedom. This basically is a cut down version of my full 12-month education mentoring program called Property Development Formula. So if you want to do it for free, the 7-step course will actually take you through each of the 7 steps in the word formula. So where are you at from a finances perspective? What do you want from an opportunity? What is that development strategy you're looking for? Research on where are you actually going to find that deal. M for method, the rapid elimination method to look at more deals in less time. U, how do you get it under contract? The kinds of contracts you can do, joint ventures, option contracts, delayed settlement with early access, and a whole bunch more. L for logistics, so how do you actually project manage the deal? And then A, accelerate, go all the way back to the start, step up a deal size, and then now that you've got a different financial position, how do we start to do that again? So that's the 7-step formula, folks. And we do also have, I guess, a full 12-month education and mentoring program called Property Development Formula. Anyone interested in that, I highly recommend doing the free course first. If you find that is of value, then reach out and have a chat about our PDF program. Bushy, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Love having a chat every single time. Whilst we are on different sides of the fence, we are somehow strangely very, very aligned.
I think we've actually got a foot over the fence. We're probably in the middle, sort of swinging backwards and forwards, to be quite honest. Because it's as both of us have said repeatedly, it's choosing the right horse for the right course, and with the comprehensive spread that links what you do and what we do, taking people through the whole piece from lifestyle goals to capability to property outcome is ultimately what it's all about. So the only one thing I want to close on is do something. Because the procrastinators, there's so much information out there now, so much data that gives people an excuse not to do anything because it's never the right time. That will be your biggest mistake. So whatever you do, choose a pathway, get your hands dirty, get into it. You will learn as you go, you will improve as you go. But if you don't, you will be kicking yourself forever in time to come, and your future self definitely won't thank you for it.
Absolutely. So I've heard a couple of different variations on this quote, but thinking about it is not doing it. I guess planning for it is not doing it. I guess writing it down is not doing it. Doing it is doing it. So if you want to do it, if you want to start to hang around with people that are doing it, we run monthly events all the way around the country. We run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, and we're putting some plans in place right now, folks, for getting to Perth real soon. So that is in the pipeline. We run these as physical events and also hybrid events, which means that you can live stream them everywhere around the country. 45 events a year, mate. So if anyone is thinking about property development, not sure, come and hang around a whole bunch of people who are actually doing it. Bushy, always a pleasure, mate. I'm going to say thank you very much for your candor and good humor in our debate. I will call it a draw. You can go back to your camp and claim the victory. I will go back to mine and claim the victory. But either way, it is always good chatting to you, mate.
I love the energy, and let's make sure we keep the conversation going, Rob.
All good. I'm going to say till then, bye for now, folks.